Hello, paper florists. Thank you so much for joining me today. Happy February. Today we're actually going to go through and I'm going to teach you how to do this awesome red bud rose for Valentine's Day. So anytime we think of Valentine's Day, we think of like the classic long stem red rose with the leaves and the baby's breath. So we're going to teach you how to make that. So I'm going to set this aside and then we'll go over supplies. So for supplies, you'll need your scissors, your red doublette. So this is the red on red, so it's the dark red and light red. Your tacky glue, your wire. So this is the thick paper covered wire. You could find this on Amazon or at the Lee Griffith shop, paper felt scissors or felt paper scissors. I'm not exactly sure what the order is on that. Or you can just use a regular 18 gauge wire. And then for the form, I'm going to use a 25 millimeter cotton spun egg. If you have the 25 millimeter spun cotton ball, you can use that as well. If you have neither, you can either use the Crayola Model Magic and make a shape similar to this, or you can take your scrap crepe and cut it into strips and then just wrap around the stem until you build up a good base for your petals to be attached to. So yeah, that is basically it. We're also going to do the sepal in this video, so just a little bit of the green doublet as well. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually just take my form and stick that onto the stem. Pretty simple. I'm going to use tacky glue for this. If you want this step to go a little faster, you can absolutely use hot glue. I just find tacky glue holds it a little bit better, but it's not as fast. So just put some glue right on the bottom and take your stem wire and shove it all the way in, and then let that sit and dry. Okay, so while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and show you what sizes to cut for your strips of petals. So I'm going to take my fold of red doublette. I'm actually going to just cut two like folds off of it. And that should be plenty of paper for one rose. If you're going to make a whole bunch, you can cut your strips across the whole fold that way. But since I'm just making one for the demo, I'm going to just show you how to do one. Okay, so I'm going to fold this up smaller so it's easier to cut across. Okay, and we are using the metric system, you guys. So this is going to be done in centimeters rather than inches. So I gotta pull out my handy dandy ruler for this. So the first strips that we're gonna cut are gonna be 4.5 inches wide. So I'm gonna just kind of mark that with my thumbnail. You can use a ruler and a pencil if you want to mark your cut line, but that should be the first one. And then the next size is going to be 5 centimeters. So again, just hold that, and at 5, I'm going to make my mark. And cut across. Make sure it's straight, or as straight as I can get it. And then we're going to do 2 strips that are 6 centimeters wide. So there's my 6 centimeter mark. I'm going to mark that. And then we're going to do 1, and 2. Okay, and then we'll have this extra little strip that we can use for something else. Okay, so let's set these aside for a moment. I'm actually going to take this little bit of scrap that we have, and I'm going to cut a little square piece from it. And this is just so we can cover the top part of our base. So when you're looking down into the rose, you don't see a bright white spot. So what I'm going to do now is grab my stem with the base on it, take my little square piece, kind of stretch it a little bit, kind of cup that so it'll fit the top of my egg. And then take my tacky glue and then just plop that right on top. And you can kind of spread it around so it'll actually stretch and conform to the tip of the egg, just like that. And if you notice, this egg is kind of like rough and beat up. When I bought these eggs from Smile Mercantile, this is like the overstock, like factory reject eggs, which is perfect for us because we cover them up anyway. So it doesn't matter if they're perfectly shaped or not. It's just a matter of getting that base shape on the bottom for our roses. So good money saving tip there. If you can find little factory rejects for these spun cotton shapes, jump on those because they are dirt cheap. Okay, so that's all glued on. Try and give that a moment to dry. Let's set that over here for now. All right, so this is our, just double check. Yeah, this is our 4.5. Okay, so we're going to start with our 4.5 centimeter tall petals, and we only need 4 of them, and these are actually going to be 3.5 centimeters wide. So again, I'm going to measure my width. So 3.5 is there. Just kind of mark that with my thumbnail, and then fold that over. And just fold that back and forth until you get 4. So there's 2 loops there, so that gives you 4 petals, and we can cut off the rest. The rest can be for another rose. Move that away. Okay, so I find with the doublette, cutting 2 is easier for me than cutting 3 or 4. So for this, I'm going to do 2 at a time. So I've got my piece and it's just folded in half. So what I'm going to do is take this, fold it in half again. And as you've seen with Susan a few times, we're going to do a modified teardrop. Although with the rose petals, they are a little bit flatter at the top of the petal. So what I'm going to do is kind of go right across and then start my rounded corner. And then we bring that back towards the center, just like that. So when you open it up, you get a petal shape that's like that. And you can actually round off the corners just a little bit more, which I think I'm going to do because it's a little too sharp for me. So we're going to do that. So that softens that corner just a little bit more. And we're going to do that again. Forgive my red fingers. I was dyeing paper earlier and I did not wear gloves, so they are very red right now. So yeah, guys, if you're going to use dyes or alcohol, ink, wear gloves. So that way you don't look like you just left a murder scene. Or if you're dyeing green paper, you don't look like you have Hulk hands. So that happens to me quite a bit because I never wear gloves for anything. All right, so then we've got our 4 petals. I'm actually going to round that off just a little bit more. Okay. Gosh. have 4 of those. And then for our 5 centimeter tall petals, we're only going to need 3. So, and those are going to also be 3.5 centimeters wide. So I'm going to measure that. So that's my 3.5. Mark it, and then fold it over, and fold it back. So that gives me 3. That will go towards another one. And then I'm going to take this. Since it is 3, I'm going to go ahead and cut 3. I'm going to fold this in half. And then do the same thing. So straight, and then start your curve. And then go back towards the center. So we've got 3 of those. I'll flip these all so they'll have the right side. Okay. All right, and then we've got our 2 6 centimeter strips, and we're going to cut a total of 12 petals, but they're going to be different sizes. So the first set of 6 are going to be 4.5 centimeters wide. So again, I'm going to measure. That gives me 4.5. It's right there. Mark that. Fold it over. So that only gave me 5. So I may need to cut a little bit more paper actually. Just trim off that little bit of excess there. So what I'll do is I'll actually just cut a 4.5 inch or 4.5 centimeter wide piece from this strip. Okay. And then I'm going to cut these into sets of 2 so I can cut a little bit easier. Okay. So these are all basically going to end up being the same shape, just different sizes. So straight, and then start to do your curve, and then go back towards the center. Okay, last set for the size at least. Okay. All right, and then the last set is also going to be a set of 6. We may not use all of these for the last set, but I am going to go ahead and try to cut 6 petals out of this, and they are going to be 5 centimeters wide. So again, just kind of mark that with my thumbnail, and then flip it over. It looks like I'm only going to get 3. So in that case, I'm going to actually just going to cut 5 centimeters straight up off of my fold here, and we'll just cut these a little bit differently. So I'll cut 3 like this. And that'll give me my 6 petals total. Okay, so again, I'm going to cut these into sets of 2 so it's easier for me to cut them. And then especially on these bigger petals, you want to make sure you kind of got to have that flat top to them. And then you just round that towards the bottom. You can kind of take it in a little bit more. These have a little bit of a wider bottom, that's okay, because we're going to be taking in the bottom of these outer petals anyway. And I will show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, and that's the very last set of petals. And then if you have like this one has like a flat edge, you can kind of just round that off with your scissors. Okay, so we've got all of our petals cut out, and then move my scissors out of the way. All right, so then we get to the fun glue part. So the very first thing, actually before we do that, we'll do some shaping. So, all right, so before we get to the gluing, we're actually going to shape all of these petals. So I'm going to, right here kind of towards the base of the petal, I'm going to go ahead and cup that. We're going to do kind of a deep cut like this, like that, and then I'm going to take my curling tool and curl just the very top edge of my petal. So it looks like that. Okay, so we're going to do that to all of these petals. So cut the bottom and then curl along the top. And I am doing it with the darker side facing me. So the bright side is facing out on these petals. Okay. These are for the very center of our flower. Okay, so again, you just get something like that. So you get more of a severe curl right here along the top of the petal. Okay, and then our next set, we're going to do the same thing. Cut towards the base, curl along the very top edge. And if you don't have the red doublet, that's completely fine. You can use the red 180 or the red 90 gram. You just may need to adjust the size of your petals to accommodate for the stretch of the paper. So you might need to do some narrower petals or stretch your paper first. At least a little bit before cutting. So on the next set here, I'm actually doing kind of a deeper curl, or at least going a little bit lower on my curl. So I get something that looks more like that. And this is where you can kind of start following the curve and you gotta get those corners pulled back a little bit more. Okay, and I'm just gonna keep doing that. Okay, so this very last set of petals, I'm going to hold off on doing any shaping on those because I don't know how many I'm going to use just yet. So I'm going to hold off on shaping this last set. I'm going to set those aside. Clean up my space just a little bit. Okay, so now this has had a decent amount of time to dry. I'm going to start with my shortest petals here. So I'm going to put some tacky glue at the base of this petal. Kind of put it up a little bit more. And then we're going to put it on our egg about 1/3 of the way up on the egg. Make sure it's straight. So you'll need to like look at it this way. Make sure it's straight. Make sure it gets really stuck on to the base. Then from here, you're going to take your petal and kind of wrap it around so you get that tight center, and then you'll glue that closed. Take a little bit of tacky glue. I'm actually going to put a little bit there too, so I can stick this side down so it'll hold, and then bring this around and hold that there for just a second. So you get that as your center. And then I'm going to take the next one, put my tacky glue on, just about that, like that. And then I'm going to put it directly across from the first one. Again, make sure it's straight. Stick it down really good. Make sure it's stuck to the base. And you can kind of stretch the paper out just a tiny bit if you need to make sure it sticks on. And then you're going to wrap the petal around so it kind of hugs that first one, just like that, and glue it down. And you can absolutely use hot glue for this. I just don't care for it. I don't like burning my fingers. So if you feel more comfortable using a hot glue gun, or if you are impatient and want this to go faster, you can absolutely do hot glue and it will go a lot faster. Okay, so that's that one. And then the last two we're going to put across from each other. I'm going to glue these two at the same time. Okay, so we're going to put one here like that. Again, make sure it's straight. And we want to make sure that these, all four of these petals are at the same height. So I'm actually going to go ahead and close this one around my first two. Okay, and then put the last one on here. Again, checking my height and then making sure that it's on there straight before I really stick it down to the base and then stick it down. And then you just take that one and then wrap it around the others and glue it down. And then we just hold that until it gets tacked on enough to where it'll hold on its own. All right. So you can already see we're getting that kind of starting spiral just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to take my next 3 petals and I'm going to put glue on all 3 of them. This is where we're really going to start working on the actual spiral of these petals. So what I want to do is put my first one kind of in between these 2 here. So we have a good starting point. And it is going to be like you want to make sure that the bottom of this petal is lined up with the rest of these, because what that's going to do is actually set your petal just a tiny bit higher than the rest, right? So glue that down, and then I'm going to put my next one here. I'm actually going to bend this so it'll be easier to see in the camera. There we go. All right, so basically what I want to do here when I place these petals on is to make like a triangle with the 3 petals. So I'm going to stick that on, and then I'm going to do the last one. And just make sure that that kind of sits between the other 2. And again, they're all sitting at about the same height to each other. This one's a little crooked, so I'm going to straighten that out. And then the height is all about the same. Okay, so once you have them glued at the base, then you can start figuring out how you want your spiral to go. So I think I'm going to do the spiral this way. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this back just a touch and put a little bit of glue there, and then stick that down. And I'm leaving this side unglued for now. Okay. Then, once I get that one stuck down, I'm going to take this one and glue both sides of the petal. Pull this back and then wrap around like that. And hold it. Okay, and then on this next one, I'm going to kick back just a little bit. Glue both sides here. I want this one pulled back. I'm going to take it and wrap this around like that and hold it. Till that gets stuck. Okay, and then the last bit is gluing this one down. So you see now how you're starting to get that actual spiral of your petals, and they're kind of overlapping each other like they're supposed to be. So hold that for a second, and then we'll get to the next one. Okay, so we're also going to glue this set in a set of 3. So go ahead and glue the bottom of these. And then this time, we're going to put them a little bit further down on the base, not all the way to the bottom though, so just about maybe like there. You see that gap here? There we go. That. So the petals still kind of come up higher than the previous set of petals. I'm actually going to move that up just a little bit. So again, just make sure before you really stick it to the base that you've got it set up straight and they are a little higher than the rest. Just like that. No, like that. There we go. Okay. So that's our first one. And then we'll do our second one. Also at about the same height. Like that. Just make sure that holds that. And then we'll do the third one right here. And then you can go back and kind of check and make sure that you have them at the right height and that they're all straight, and then you kind of squish them down at the bottom. Like that. Okay, and then we're going to keep with the same rotation. So we're going to keep going this way. So again, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glue, pull this back just a touch, and I'm going to go a little bit further down on the petal this time. And I'm going to hug that. And you kind of want to leave some spacing. So you don't want to wrap everything super tight either. So you want to hold that. And again, I'm not gluing this side yet. Okay, and then the next one is going to be this one. So we get our rotation in the right direction. Glue both sides. And again, not super tightly wrapping around. I'm going to take it and hold it there. And then the last one. Put glue on either side like that. Bring it in and kind of loosely wrap it around like that. Hold it. And then I'm going to put some glue right here on this side and wrap it around so I can close it. Okay, so you can kind of see how this is building up now, right? We got You still have this like bottom rounded shape, but you're starting to get your spiral at the top. All right, and then the second set of these smaller outer petals. Glue those. All right, and then this time we're going to glue them closer to the bottom. And actually what I'm going to do so they fit the bottom better is I'm going to do this extra little pleating bit here. So on the outside of your petal, you're going to do just a tiny line of glue like that. And you're going to fold it over on itself like that. So it makes a pleat on the outside, or a dart if you're a sewer. So something like that. And then we'll glue the bottom here. And stick that down. So this time what's happening is the petals are starting to go back down. So like from the center, they kind of go up and then come back down as you add more petals. Okay, so you can see now with that extra pleat, it's still fitting that curve pretty well. I'm going to go back and do that on these as well. So on the outer side of the petal, put a little bead of glue and then fold it over onto itself so it will make a little dart on the outside like that. And you can kind of encourage it with your thumbnail if you need to make it a little bit more defined. Should have done that before I put glue on the base, but it's okay. All right, so we've got that, and I'm kind of, what I'm doing here is like ironing out that pleat. So I'm basically just taking my thumbnail and like creasing the pleat. And that also helps curl the petal a little bit more. All right, so put some glue on the base there. And then put it here. Glue that down. And then again, do our little pleat. And this is why I was saying on these outer petals, if the bottom is a little bit wider, that's okay. Because doing this little pleat technique will make that narrow again. Okay, and then put glue on the base and bring that all the way to where the stem hits. Just like that. And with these three, you really want to make sure that the bottom is glued really well. Because this is where the spiral bit's going to get a little tricky. So flip this around because this is the first one I want to glue down. So we're going to start with this one. A little dot of glue there. And glue that down. And then here, going to flip that around, close that. Actually, we'll make that a little bit looser. Like that. Okay, next one. Put that down. Oh, that one just popped off, so we're gonna hold it just like that for a second. So that way both of these get stuck really good. Okay, and then last one. Wrap that around and stick it down. Okay, so then at this point, you can kind of decide how much you actually want these petals to curl out. If you want to kind of massage this out just a little bit more to make them more pronounced, you can kind of go in and like push those edges down and pronounce that curve or the curve of the petals just a little bit more. Like that. Okay, so we're starting to see the shape kind of coming along. All right, so now we're at our very last set of petals. So I am going to go ahead and shape these. And usually on this last set, I'll use anywhere between 4 to 6 petals. So it just kind of is based off your sensibilities and your taste of how you want it to look. If you want it to be more open, you can add more petals. If you don't want it to be more open, you don't have to add as many. I would add at least 3. So you have that, have it look finished, but you can add more or less depending on how you want it to look. So for this one, I'm doing the deep cup at the bottom of the petal, right? Again, and then doing a much larger curl towards the top. And then what I'm going to do is start curling the sides of the petal even more. So you get a shape that looks like that. And the petal at the top kind of looks like that. So it's starting to kind of curl back here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with 3 and then see if we need more. All right, so again, with these larger petals, I am going to do the little pleat technique on that. So I'm going to pull this around, put a little dot of glue there, and then fold it over onto itself, just like that, and then smash that down. So we get that deeper cup. This is also a technique that you can use for peony petals as well, if you really want that kind of deep cup of your peony petals. And just a little dot of glue. Fold it over on itself. And then you can kind of press that pleat. Last one. Sometimes, depending on how you fold the paper over on itself, that pleat is not entirely centered. So sometimes you need to kind of go back through with your nails and push that in so it's a little bit more centered. And just gonna press that in like that. Okay, and then going to put glue at the base of these. And then we're going to take the bottom of our rose, and so you see these little open spots here. This is where we're going to stick our last three. I'm going to put that there. Stick that down. Down. And on these outermost petals, when you're gluing them onto the base, you don't want to put the glue up too high because that will potentially mess up your spiral. You want to make sure you have enough paper that's not glued down, that's potentially overlapping one of these other petals, and then that messes up how your spiral goes. So it looks like there's actually enough clearance on these, so it's not that big a deal, but just be mindful if, the base of your petal is still too wide after you do the pleating, like how much glue you actually put at the bottom. All right, so we got that, and now it looks all crazy. So we are going to go ahead and close that up just to get a little bit again. And again, we're going to be mindful of our spiral. So glue here. Close that up a little. Did not stick down like it's supposed to. So I'll hold that for just a little bit longer. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit lower on the petal just to make sure it actually has somewhere to stick. It's just not wanting to stick where I initially put glue. So we're going to do that instead. And then go to our next one. And again, kind of lower on the petal on both sides. Put a little drop of glue and close it up. And then one more on either side. Put a little dot of glue kind of towards, like, a little lower than halfway down on the petal. Pull that one back. Wrap this around. And glue it. And again, these outer petals, you really kind of want to make sure that they do curl out a little bit more. Okay, and then one more dot of glue there on this last petal, so I can pull that around and close that up. I'll hold that for just a second. Okay. So you can see that with the way these are curling back, that the petals look like they're kind of starting to fall away from the bud. And that's what we want, right? So I think what I want to do is add one more, at least, right here, and kind of really have that one falling away from the rest. I'm going to do one more. Stretch this out. And then I'm going to curl this one quite a bit. I'm going to round this off just a little bit more. Okay. So really make sure you get a good curl on that very last one. And we are going to pleat this one as well. So just a little bit of glue. Fold it over onto itself. And then press it down. So that. Okay. Put glue on the base here. Take a look again. Yeah, I think I want to put it. Actually, I think I'm going to put it right here. So again, I'm going to flip it over so you can see where I'm actually putting it. I'm going to put it right here in between those two petals. So now we've got one that's kind of falling away from the rest. And you can kind of glue that up a little bit more if you don't want it to be as like severe of falling away from the rest. But that's up to you. I think I might just glue a little bit to keep it a tiny bit more vertical than it is right now. Like that. Let's see, it's like that. All right, and then we're just gonna let that dry. I'm gonna straighten up my stem wire again. Set this over to the side so it can dry. And then we're gonna work on the sepal. So at this point, I'm gonna do a little bit of coloring, and this part is completely optional. I didn't mention this in the supply list, so if you don't have these, it's completely fine. So I'm actually going to color the doublette to give a lighter color green on the inside of the sepal, so it gives a little bit more of a realistic look, so you can see that that's really light. So you have that contrast there. So I'm going to do that. Pan pastel that I'm using are going to be the bright yellow green pan pastel, and then the permanent green tint, which is this like kind of sea foamy green. It's almost a color of my little backing paper here. So I'm going to take my large oval makeup brush that I use for my pan pastels, and I'm actually going to color the whole piece of paper on this one side. So on the green doublette, you've got your two different colors. So you've got your darker green and then like your lighter green. I'm actually going to color on the lighter green side. So I'm going to take my permanent green tint. That's a lot. I'm just going to dust the entire piece here. It doesn't really matter the size of paper that you're using for this because we're going to cut it down to size afterwards. We just want to make sure we have enough pan pastel on the paper so that way when you do cut, you cut a piece that's fully colored. So we're just going to work the pastel into the paper to lighten it up a little bit. The other thing you can do is if you don't have the Fern and Moss green doublet, or if you have a whole bunch of the cypress and green tea doublet, this is a good use for that as well. You can actually use the bright yellow green shade pan pastel color, as well as the permanent green tint color on that one to get a color that is similar to that. That's actually what I used on this one, was the green tea and cypress. So it's a good way to use that paper because that particular color combination of doublet doesn't get a whole lot of use. It's just that green, that lighter green is just not conducive to a lot of paper flowers. All right, so I've covered the whole thing with the permanent green tint. So what now is kind of make it a little bit more yellow because it's kind of blue right now. So I'm going to take just a little bit of this and kind of mix that over top. And we're not using very much of that. We're just kind of like lightly tapping our brush into that yellow green. And we're really just working that color in. Okay. All right. So got that colored, and now you can kind of see that it's very different now, and there's more contrast between those two colors. So what I'm going to do now is take this and cut it into a strip that is about 2 inches long, or 2 inches wide rather. And this is what we'll use to make our sepals out of. So to do the width of the sepal, we're going to do about 3/4 of an inch wide on our sepal. So we're going to do 5 of those. We're just going to accordion fold until we get 5. Cut off the rest. Okay, and then I'm actually just going to cut all 5 sepals together. So we're going to round off the bottom and then go in towards the center, flip it over, do the same thing. So round off the bottom and go straight toward the center. It's very similar to how we did the leaves for the carnation. They're just not quite as long. Okay. So we've got pieces like that. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take the tips and I'm going to add some little jagged edges. I'm just taking my scissors and kind of cutting in at an angle a little bit and then cutting off just a little bit of the leftover edge from cutting in. You get kind of that jaggedy edge there. And you don't have to go very far down on these. I would say maybe 2/3 of the way down. I'm going to flip that over, do the same thing. And these do not have to be perfect in any way. And you can even separate these out and make them look a little bit different. And add your little jagged edges to each one, or maybe like do a set of 2 and then a set of 3, just so you have some variation on your edges. But in the interest of saving time, I'm doing them all at the same time. Okay, so we've got our pieces cut. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to curl all of them pretty steep like that. And we're curling them so the lighter green side is facing in towards the flower. We're going to do that on 4 of them. And the 5th one, we're actually going to curl out the opposite direction. So this way, we're going to curl it out like that. And then I'm going to cup the bottom of each of these. And then to rough these up just a little bit more, I'm going to take them and twist them back and forth just a little bit. And you can kind of leave them twisted. You can kind of untwist them. You can curl them one way or the other. So you have something like that. So it's a little bit funky and different. And you can kind of see some more of that detail with the lighter green kind of peeking through. Take this and like twist all of them. And you kind of want to do them in different directions too. So you want to have some twisting to the left and some twisting to the right. So you get a little bit of variation in how these look. And you can also twist some of these down a little bit further than others. Get something like that. Okay, then I'll grab my glue again. And we're going to glue the sepal on. One of the things I really love about adding the sepal to your flowers is that it can kind of cover up any boo-boos you have. So if you have any like glue spots showing, or you've got a petal that is cut a little wonky or something like that, you can cover up those mistakes a little bit. So I'll put a little bit of glue on all of these. And then we'll start sticking them on. So I usually try to put the first couple at least to where they will cover up the spaces between my petals. So I've got kind of a gap there. So I'm going to put one of my sepals there to kind of cover that up and make sure that actually gets pretty well covered. So when you're placing these, you kind of want to make sure they're spaced out enough to where it almost looks like a star on the bottom. Okay, and then last one that's curling out and down. Put that one right there. Okay. Make sure that's all good stuck down. And then you can kind of make sure you get your sepals to look exactly the way you want. So you can, if you want it to be more close and like hugged into the flower, you can kind of glue that together, like kind of glue that down. But I think they're curled enough to where you don't need to do that. And you can kind of see how like these are all twisted and curled in different directions, and that just gives it some interesting character. All right, so that is it for today's tutorial. I am going to go ahead and follow up tomorrow with finishing the stem and making the leaves. So we will end up with the finished product like that. So I will see you all tomorrow. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a good day.